Guys, so I'm on this channel, and today we are ranking the Stranger Things 2 episodes. I'm excited to do this. Just a plan before I go to Mexico for 5 days. Just currently where I am on Stranger Things, I'm episodes done with season 3. So because I've also had time, because I wanted to watch some of the movies on my top 14 that I think will be there that haven't been there in a while. And then also I'm going to include some honorable mentions on that video because there's some movies I wish they would be there but couldn't. So yeah, not much else to say, but let's get into this. Alright, got my list and let's get rolling. So starting things off in last place is going to be Chapter 7, The Lost Sister. Yeah, this episode, I think everyone probably has this one in last place. It's not a bad episode, really. It just plays so horribly in the season. Even if it was maybe one episode earlier, I think it could have been better. I actually think that would have been a perfect spot for it. But Red is everything. Red is the demi-dogs are attacking Hawkins. They escape the Upside Down up the sort of tunnel thing, and then going up to attack the lab. It just pauses to have this side story with 11. Again, it's interesting, but just doesn't feel right. It's fun to see that this takes place in Chicago because, A, it's where I live. But just where it's placed, that's really the big problem. The plotline itself, it's alright, I guess. It's not bad. It's just, it does follow up a small little hole that was set up at the beginning of the season, which that's interesting. Don't really have that many issues with it, but it's really just the worst of the season because it doesn't exactly fit Stranger Things because it's just a bit kind of out there and just kind of feels like a bit more of an underground crime episode with the 11 characters, sort of, and with Stranger Things characters more so than an episode of the show. So it's kind of fun and odd in that, right? Kind of a mixed thing, if I'm going to be honest. But the episode as a whole just doesn't fit the season. You could easily take it out, and you'd miss some small things, but this didn't need a full episode length of story. But it's fine. It's not that bad. 8 is gonna be episode 1, MadMax, the season premiere. Nothing really wrong with this episode. It's just not the most exciting episode. There's the whole plot line involving the plants and all, but then which doesn't really go anywhere until like episode 4 or 5 or something. And then there's also the plot line involving the middle school kids, or I guess I don't know what, I think they're in 8th grade now or something, I don't know. And now there's this new Max character that a couple of them like, so it goes off with that plot line for throughout the episode, and then introducing her brother, who's this full on, or I don't know if he actually said anything in this first episode. I don't think so until the second episode. I don't quite remember. I guess there's that. There's also the plot line involving the high school teenagers, which doesn't really do much, but yeah, introduces the Bob character, which I actually think I found him annoying in the first 2 episodes, but episode 3, once he gave Will that little speech, I started to like him a lot more. I don't know. I just found the character because it's kind of annoying throughout the first two episodes, but then he became a fun character after that. So it's nice to see this introduction here and how Joyce's relationship gets right off to the start. But really, just not the most interesting things that are happening in this episode. And it introduces that whole thing at the lab, I think, where it's run by new people, and then Will is having these sort of episodes or whatever. I guess it kind of gets off to that, but really, not much really happens in this episode, so it's just not the most interesting things. Coming in number 7 is going to be Chapter 2, Trick or Treat. I like Halloween episodes and TV shows. It's fun to see that here. Nothing particularly wrong with this episode. It's just, again, somewhat episode 1, not the most interesting of things. It continues the plant plot line, which, again, doesn't really go anywhere. Continues the Will episodes, and now we see this giant shadow monster or whatever, which that's pretty cool. That's good special effects, I'd say. And overall, I like how they're going to school and the nerds are the only ones wearing costumes. That's kind of fun. Have this Max character, actually, the whole plotline actually goes somewhere. That's pretty good. And I think this is when Billy actually gets introduced, and as this character who really hates and is in a bad state of life, who's a full-on dick. So that's interesting, but again, and also there's the 11 plotline. We find out that she's still alive at the end of the first episode. Continues that on, and actually goes somewhere with it, so that's pretty interesting. But really, not much else really happens. There's the stuff with Will, which I think it starts to kick in right away, I guess. Coming in number 6 under Chapter 4, it's Will the Wise. I like the stuff involving Hopper and Will, where they finally Will's drawing all the roots, and that's getting put in the house, setting up some interesting comments later in the season. There's the stuff with I like the stuff with Will and how he's now kind of taken over by this shadow monster, this giant monster. Beyond that, I don't really remember much else. Oh, there's the 11 stuff. I like the 11 stuff in this episode where, well, part of it. I like the second half of it where she went off to see her actual mother and leads to some interesting things, and the way everything's kind of the pieces are kind of put together, kind of leaving off from what episode 6 told us from season 1. And I thought that was interesting. But then there's some bad moments, specifically the stuff with Hopper and 11. I have a hard time not cringing at that. And it's like, I kind of rewatched the beginning, I'm like, it's just like the way everything is played out, just kind of both characters are being very unlikable. So it's like, it's just not a great moment. But really, other than that, it's a good episode. Coming in number 5 is going to be Chapter 5, Dig Dug. There's some great stuff in this episode. The whole thing involving Hopper sort of kind of investigating the whole thing with the roots, which set up in the last episode. I thought that was really good. I liked all the stuff. I think, that's episode 6 where the whole thing with Steve and Dustin started. Don't quite remember. But then this episode ends with the whole thing involving Will and the whole fire now, realizing now he's the spy and that they takes him to a hospital or something. That's all really interesting, and I think that's a great ending and leads into the next episode very well, I think. And I think this is really when the season really starts kicking the high gears, more or less. I like the 11 stuff where she's figuring out the whole thing with her mom. I thought that was good. And I thought this is the Nancy and Jonathan plotline where they're kind of figuring themselves out a bit. And that's kind of a sum up of the episode. With episode 4, and I think this is a bit better than episode 4 because it just doesn't have any of the stupid moments that episode 4 kind of has. 11 and Hopper. And there's that. And then I think the whole thing with Dart, I didn't really mention this about episode 4. I thought Dustin was kind of just being dumb, but at the same time being kind of a loving owner, more or less. There's that. And then leads into this episode where he traps him. And yeah, interesting. Overall, I do really like this episode. And this is where we start to get into the really good episode. Coming in number 4 is going to be Chapter 3, The Pollywog. I really like this episode because it just has so many great character moments. There's the thing with Will and Bob where Bob's giving the advice and sort of telling him to the thing to going whaleys, and the end of the episode where that was a mistake pretty much, and Will and the thing sucks Will. There's just so many great character moments in this episode. Also the stuff with 11 and where she kind of goes out of the house and sees Mike and interacting with Max, and she's not really happy about that for a multitude of reasons. So there's that whole thing. And then overall, I think the episode involved where Steve and Nancy actually break out. There's the whole basketball scene, which I think is kind of fun. There's the Billy stuff here. There's just a bunch of, I think, great scenes in this episode. The whole Dart plotline is really introduced here where they're looking for him. This episode is just fun and just enjoyable. So even though the season hasn't fully kicked in the high gear, but there's a bunch of great moments that it doesn't really bother me quite yet. It really bothered me a bit in episode 4 and 5 of it. So overall, I thought this is a great episode because just all the great character moments. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, but I'm not 100% sure. And then there's the Will stuff. Hopper, I don't remember. Oh yeah, Hopper is doing his thing where he is apologizing to 11 or something, and then things happen. So yeah, I love this episode. It was great. I just don't think it was quite as memorable as the top 3. Now we kind of get into the great episode, the fantastic episodes, and then number 3 is going to be episode 6, or chapter 6, The Spy. And this is really when the season, I'm like, yes, this was classic Stranger Things. This is what I loved from season 1. Well, different, but whatever. You have Will, we learn that he's the spy, and he's connected to the shadow monster, and then, or we learned in episode 8, more or less, sort of, but, and Will is like, sort of, kind of in like a bit of a deep phase, sort of, where he is kind of in like a very paranormal state, or whatever you'd call it, where the thing's kind of taking over him, and he's kind of the spy behind it, so the thing can essentially know where they are. And then there's the whole thing where the demi-dogs kind of emerge, which sets up the whole thing in episode 8, which I don't even think is ruined by episode 7, but we'll ignore that. So there's the Hopper stuff, which how he's involved in it. That's kind of good. I love the whole battle at the whole bus thing, and with Max, Steve, Dustin, and Lucas. That whole thing is actually a lot of fun. So really, I think the entire episode, I just really enjoy this episode. It's fun, it's enjoyable, has tension when it needs to. So nothing I really dislike. I just like the top 2 more. Pretty simple. Coming in number 2 is going to be episode 9 or chapter 9, the finale, The Gate. This is really just a great conclusion where 11 closes that ginormous, probably 40-foot gate that's kind of taken underground or something, I don't know. There's that. There's all the great sequences involving taking out those other extra demi-dogs that are still alive and whatever. There's the Will side of things where the thing escapes Will's. There's just all the pieces that kind of make it so that they can get rid of these demi-dogs and save the day. Just everything put together. Just everything's just great. Everything is, there's the whole thing involving stopping the demi-dogs and burning those roots, which ends up, and then 11's closing the gate. There's all that at the moment. It's a little last moment with Dart. I thought that was handled well. And then killing the Mind Flayer, or getting the Mind Flayer out of Will, that was well done. And just everything put together just works very well. And how Hopper is involved in this. I thought throughout the most of the season, I thought he's a bit of an unlikable character, but he makes the right decision, the finale, and help it. Well, obviously he would, but overall, just all great stuff. I loved all of it. The only reason why it's not number 1 is that I just think a lot of the best moments of the season come from the episode 8, so that's really just the simple fact. But it's kind of I feel like both of them kind of feel like a 1-2 part of it, and I just think part 1's a little bit better than part 2. So that's kind of how the last 2 episodes of the season kind of feel like to me, and it's not a bad thing against this episode. I think this episode's fantastic. And I just like all the 4 kind of sides of it. 11 and Hopper, Dustin, Lucas, Steve and Max, Nancy, Jonathan, where I think they were in the lab doing, I forgot what they were doing. It doesn't matter. And also Mike, Will, his mom, and Jonathan. I don't know. All the pieces put together, all fantastic. So, great episode. Fantastic finale. Not as good as the season 1 finale, but great episode. And the number 1 is going to be episode 8 or chapter 8, The Mind Flayer. I thought this episode, everything about it, was fantastic. You have the haunted house elements of it, or vibe of it, where at the beginning, where these demi-dogs are attacking the Hawkins lab, which lasts for about half the episode. And all of that is just fantastic. You have the whole sequence where they're kind of walking through the forest or whatever, kind of leading off. And I think everything about that was great. It was filled with tension. Some of the season's best moments where Jonathan and Joyce are trying to get back to Will, and just fantastic stuff. You have the moment where 11 comes back. That's all amazing. There's just so many amazing moments, and how it's kind of the part 1 of the finale, and I think it's better than the part 2. I thought these last 2 episodes of the season were amazing. I just wish the rest of the season was a bit better. So, overall, fantastic episode. Bob's death, pretty emotional. Even though he kind of made a stupid decision, which kind of annoys me in these kind of shows and movies, specifically. All the horror movies do the same thing too, where characters make this dumb decision and whoop, they're dead. So, not a great comparison, but whatever. I think this entire episode was well handled. I think the Mike and Will plotline was handled well, and how they plan to take the Mind Flayer out of Will's body or soul or brain, whatever. Just the way it's set up, the finale was just amazing, and I just think there are just some more epic moments, specifically 11 coming back, and I think they kind of exceed what the finale was doing. But both of them make a great 1-2 punch, and I think this is number 1. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Share your rank in the comments below. Where do you think you rank? This one is a bit harder to rank than season 1. Season 1, even though the middle bunches on other episodes in season 1 I think were a bit harder to rank than season 2, but I think overall, if you ask me to rank the episodes of season 1, it'd be much harder than easier than season 2. I don't know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below, and new outro.